And now we are going to move over to the Fireside chat, which is going to be moderated by Dave Bradley from Still Media. He's going to be talking to Kristan Rivers from AdInMo and Chris Wright from AdInMo. The subject being, what do game developers really think about monetization? Are you there, Dave and guests?
Hi, Stuart. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Dave. So I'm going to hand over and let you crack on. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Stuart. Great. What a great introduction there to the idea of new ad formats. Very exciting talk right now. I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage, sporting some new branding. I'll let them introduce that in a moment. Our friends from AdInMo. So this is a talk called What Do Game Developers Really Think About Monetization? And we've got Kristan Rivers, who's the CEO and founder of AdInMo, and Chris Wright, who's the CTO at AdInMo. I'll let them introduce themselves and their experience a little bit more in a moment. But just to set the scene for a second, every year and regularly, PocketGamer.biz does a survey. We survey the developers in the world. It forms the backbone of our mobile game developer trends report, which we produce. And we're working on one that will be out at the end of the month. And we're very, very grateful that this time we've been supported by AdInMo. And the results just came back in. We ran the survey questions online for a month in August. And our partners AdInMo had some questions in there. And each time we do one of these surveys, as well as taking a temperature of the industry and looking at demographics and so on, we also ask some questions about an area that's of specific interest. And we've been looking at ad monetization formats, very pertinent to this topic. So I won't give anything, no spoilers, because I think some of that will come out during the course of this conversation. But that's the backstory. That's kind of where we've kind of arrived at the conversation here. So that's the kind of setting the scene. I'd now like to ask our guests to introduce themselves. Chris, let's come to you first of all. Yeah, that's it. If you'd introduce yourself, please, and what's your background? What's your route into this?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Stuart. Hi, everybody. So I've been in the games industry since 1995, which is going back a long time. So I started off as a software engineer back in the day, back on kind of PlayStation 1 and PC. Worked on a game called Playing Crazy. I then got involved in mobile. So I was one of the original guys at one of the big mobile games publishers, iPlay, back in about 2000. That was really interesting. That was when we were doing WAP and then the very early Java games and all of that sort of stuff. So that was a really interesting ride. And I headed up game publishing and development for iPlay. iPlay got bought in 2007, got bought by Oberon, and I left then. And I spent 3 years kind of doing a whole load of different things. I did a whole bunch of development and publishing. I did a bunch of work for, who did I work for? Capcom. I worked on some Microsoft stuff. I worked on Crackdown 2. I worked on some EA games as an exec producer, that sort of thing. And then in 2010, I co-founded the analytics company Delta DNA. So I started that with a friend of mine, Mark. We started that end of 2010. That was really interesting, right? A lot of kind of learnings from building back-end server infrastructure. That company was very successful. And obviously it got bought last year by Unity Technologies, and it's now the analytics platform behind Unity. And then I joined. I knew Kristan actually all the way back on, we worked together at iPlay. So we've been talking about AdInMo for a number of years. And some of the stuff I did at Delta had some connection to that. So when the opportunity joined, so I joined and actually invested in AdInMo at the same time, the start of this year, as we raised our first kind of seed round. So yeah, that's my background.
Fantastic, thank you. And yeah, Kristan, tell us about yourself. Introduce yourself, please, and also maybe want to say something about the new logo over your shoulder as well. But firstly, what's your background? What's your role into this?
Thanks for the intro, Dave. And yeah, as Chris mentioned, I think this is the third time, the third company I've worked with Chris at. I feel like it's like Jake and Elwood from the Blues Brothers. We're getting the band back together. It's really exciting to be working with Chris again. Yeah. So background. I didn't start out in games, unlike Chris. I was a gamer, but I started off at Apple Computer. They brought me over to the UK. My first introduction to the games industry was at iPlay, Digital Bridges, iPlay alongside Chris. And then spent a lot of time from there out in Asia, working for a number of mobile entertainment and digital entertainment companies. Lived in Beijing for a number of years, Singapore for Paramount Pictures, led the digital distribution team for Paramount. And yeah, as Chris mentioned, this is an idea that has been a long time forming, and it was great to kind of get the the nugget to the genesis of the idea out there and started about 3 years ago with major investment raised earlier this year. And now we're kind of firing on all cylinders. As you mentioned, we've got a new branding, which certainly I think everybody will agree is much nicer looking than the previous logo that we were running with, the branding we were running with.
That's great, thank you. And so here's what we're going to do for this fireside chat. I've got some questions I want to ask you about what AdInMo are doing on the theme of what do game developers really think about monetization. I know we've got some stats from that survey which we'll tease in this chat. Just for those listening in, if you have any questions for Kristan and Chris, drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the of your Zoom window. I'll keep an eye on that. You guys don't have to worry about that. I'll bring those up at the end. We'll kind of go through what we've got here. So I want to talk about the first stat that we saw. Now, is there a slide for this? I don't know whether you've got one. If not, we can just go into the question.
Assuming I can make it work.
There we go. Okay. So this is something very revealing, I think, that hold on a second. Let me just grab there we go. I see it. Perfect. So this is something very revealing, I think. This was one of the questions in the survey. And the question was, what are your top 3 features when integrating with a monetization platform? And there were some pretty clear answers. And you can see there that the 75% said that their most important thing was it does not interrupt gameplay. So, Chris, let's come to you first again. I was kind of quite surprised by how definitive that was. Maybe you weren't, but what do you think it means in practice? Can you give us some examples and dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I think you're right. We kind of thought that would be kind of high up, but the fact that came up, not only the top, but at such a strong level was really, really telling. We've had ads in games since the kind of the free-to-play space. So in the last 10 years, it's become more and more important as part of monetization. And we've done it really badly so far. We've done it almost like TV. We've done it as as an ad break. You have to go and you have to watch an ad in the middle of your experience, or at a point when you're trying to play the game. It doesn't feel very good. And we've tried to make it a bit more interactive with rewarded ads, but it's never been particularly feeling like it's a part of the game experience. So the idea of trying to get ads more integrated into the game so it doesn't interrupt gameplay, you can see why that is such an important part. Because at the moment, it feels like we are 20 years ago in the TV where you had these ad breaks, and TV has moved on, and you're starting to see kind of ads much more integrated into the TV experience, and same with games. That I think people are looking at ways of trying to make it much more part of the experience. So I think that fits with that kind of interrupted part, the ease of integration. Again, we're seeing so many different SDKs you've got to put into your game, and it affects the the playability and the performance of the game. So making that easy and simple to integrate and just a part of the build experience has to be really high up. So not a huge surprise, but I think the strength of that push to non-interrupted gameplay and making kind of ads part of the experience rather than being a separate thing is really telling in how things have kind of moved on in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it speaks to one of the themes, I think, of this track that's coming up. The other stat in there about transparency, I'll come to in a minute. But Kristan, let me just come over to you as well, just to weigh in on that. Does that stat surprise you? And how does that kind of play into and sort of drive your philosophy? How is AdInMo responding to that kind of desire from developers?
Yeah, no, great point. Back to the only surprise I have is it's not higher, right? We all hate these interruptions, both as gamers and developers. It's not unique to the games world, as Chris said. Any immersive experience, whether it's movies, much prefer watching a movie in the theater or using Netflix. Our attention is a premium, and to have to interrupt it is horrible. I think the thing that is a surprise to me is the different types of genres that we're starting to see these AdInMo ad units used in now. Look, when we started the company, we thought it would just be AdInMo admin units would just be in sports games and real world games, the places you see billboards already.
Right.
Natural fit. I continue to be surprised every day as developers and publishers reach out to us and show us integrations they've done, things that we hadn't thought of. Some of them very obvious, like fashion games. We're in a couple fashion games. That was obvious. We should have thought of that. I should have thought of that one. But other ones, puzzle games where the puzzle pieces themselves maybe ad units, or card games where it's the backs of cards. There's a lot of neat places, and I think we haven't really fully explored all the different ways that these ad units can, at the very least, fit into the gameplay, possibly even enhance the game experience. And Chris has a lot more experience on this than I do, of course, as through his years in the industry.
Right. So we're talking about kind of, if you like, forgive my kind of inaccurate term, but sort of an ambient advertising, right? So we're talking about kind of billboards. We're talking about people, like in a movie, you have maybe kind of product placement. So you're talking about that kind of experience. Chris, do you want to add into that? How is AdInMo kind of delivering that sort of experience that people are seeing ads as they play?
It's very that's very true, Dave. I mean, it's very much that kind of product placement, or the digital out of home. The idea of walking down the road and you're seeing on the side of a bus shelter, you've got kind of ads playing. So we're so used to that experience. We're so actually, when we watch films, we expect there to be a Coca-Cola can, or we expect there to be, a live brand in the bar when we see that. And again, on sports, we expect to see, the branding on the side, and it feels strange when that isn't there. Kristan's right that actually, we're starting to see it go beyond that. It's not just those kind of pure billboards and it's pure kind of sports. It's becoming part of the kind of the whole experience. And you've seen that in films. I mean, it's not just the real world films that have product placement. You see kind of product placement all the way through. Even in the future, you see and they'll maybe change the brand slightly, or they'll retro it if you're doing something back in the in the 1930s. But they try and fit it and make it feel more like the real world, or the world you're trying to work within. But it grounds it. It gives you things that you see in your real life, and you can ground them in the experience. And so the same sort of thing is happening in TV, and it's definitely starting to happen in games. And that's what we're all about, is making the ads feel like they're part of the experience rather than being something separate and a jarring experience.
Right. See, that's interesting to me, and it brings me to my next question, because I totally get the idea that ad units like that actually help with the world building as well. That's great. And also, I think, Kristan, it was fascinating that you're looking at outside of things like sports games and simulations. But this brings me to a question, and it kind of goes back to that slide again, where the third thing that people were interested in was the fact that developers wanted transparency of where their ads are showing. So that sort of makes me think, well, if you're serving ads inside somebody else's game, do they have any sort of trepidation about this? You're adding to their world. What sort of extra responsibility do you folks have? Chris, do you want to run with that first?
Yeah, this comes a bit from the experience at Delta as well. So we ran as a part of the Delta technology, still is a thing called Smart Ads, which was ad mediation. So we got quite involved in the ad space. And one of the things we found, and a lot of the kind of feedback from developers, was they never got to see what the ads were being displayed in the game. That you kind of handed over this experience, and okay, it was a separate thing. It was a rewarded ad separate from your game, but you couldn't see what it was. And lots of developers wanted to control. They didn't want their competitors' games to be advertised, for example. They didn't want things that kind of interrupted with their brand, or they didn't want casino games, so on. But you could never get access to that, and it was very much separated off. The ad tech always felt completely separated from the game. And that's so much more important when you're actually doing it as part of the game experience. So one of the things that AdInMo does, and we're building into our technology, is this ability for developers to see the ads. So they can see what ads are coming in. They have much more control of it. The transparency is there. I mean, I'm a big believer in transparency across the board, that you get access to your data, you can see what's actually happening. We provide as much as we possibly can. And something we did a lot at Delta, and I'm really kind of aiming to bring into AdInMo as well, is trying to make it as easy and as transparent as possible, so developers kind of buy into the technology. And that kind of fits into the ease of integration as well, but definitely into this transparency and this ability to see what ads. I mean, why would you not want to? And as we start to get more integrated into premium games and into big licenses, it's going to become so much more important. And You see that with films. They do a lot of product placement and very much defining what ads can go into there. So we want to provide that kind of level of accessibility, so people can see the ads that are going through and then have some kind of control over it as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm conscious that we're sort of about halfway through. So what I'm going to do is I'd like to take my next question straight to Kristan, and you feel free to kind of weigh in on that point there. But actually, I'd just like to sort of swerve this a little bit. And the question we asked was about what developers thought. But Kristan, do you have any kind of sense about what end users think of this as well?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, because that is, that they're why we're all doing this, right? It's for the gamers, and if we're not creating better experiences for them, they're going to leave the games, turn out, etc. Look, we did. So first of all, our premise has always been there's no click-throughs on this. We don't want users to leave the game experience. I think that's one of the things that we hate about traditional ads today is you interrupt the game experience with an ad the user didn't want anyways. And as a developer, your best case scenario is they click out, leave your game, probably to download another game, right? 95% plus of all the ads you see are for other games. So that was really important to us from the game experience on that side. I think we did some research ourselves, and we saw when we asked users about their preference, it was clear, and it's very simple, that if you give the user a choice of, do you want an interruptive 30-second video ad that you have to watch to get back to your game, or a banner ad that you're going to accidentally click when you're trying to click the next level or button or something like that, or would you rather have the ads kind of natively and, as you said, immersively brought into the experience? Of course, they're gonna prefer that, and we've seen that. It's about a 3x preference. So yeah, I mean, to me, this is a win for gamers, absolutely. And if it's a win for gamers, now we just have to turn that into a win for developers, and of course, a win for the advertisers.
No, absolutely. That's good. Actually, I'm going to stay with you, Kristan, for a sec there. I know that one of the themes of this track is about monetization, new ad formats, and you're going to be joining a panel, I think, probably straight after this. So you're going to stay right there. But obviously, this is a topic that's very much in the zeitgeist at the moment. We saw Audio Mob talk about it as well. Yet, from the survey data, it looks like the majority of developers are still relying pretty heavily on in-game purchases and rewarded ads. There you go. You got a slide. You're way ahead of me. There you are. Great. So this is kind of how people feel about their ad formats they're using at the moment. And also, we saw that still people are using those kind of traditional methods. So do you want to speak to kind of this start a little bit about how people feel? And also, just do you see a big change coming?
Yeah. I'm going to touch on this, but I think I'm going to hand over to Chris very quickly, because he, with his depth of expertise, I think can address this really well. But yeah, look, from developer perspective, when we look at the things that they care about, the banner ads, we know video ads, they're great for monetization. They're kind of okay at best, if not really crap for retention and gameplay and all the other metrics that we care about. So yes, you can make money from these types of ads, from traditional ads, while you're pissing off your users. And so I think that's it's nice to actually get some granularity to the data. I think at a high level, this is something that we expected to see some of this kind of feel, and it's nice to kind of see that expectation has very much been borne out.
Right. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as Kristan said, it's good to see that people are getting some positive feedback on this, though, and it's not, from a monetization point of view, it's not too bad, but it's still not great. And I think specifically around the user retention side of things, that people feel that certainly banner ads and the kind of standard ads are not great for keeping users. It pushes people away, and it interrupts the game experience. So yes, it's good for making money, and obviously that's a big part of this, but it has a negative impact. And the whole point of this is to try and make ads much more of a good experience rather than a bad experience. So we want to keep that kind of monetization. We want to keep the fact that it's making money for developers, because that allows them to build new games and allows them to make money off the games they have. But we want to make sure that it's not impacting user attention, and they shouldn't. None of these things should impact. They should at least be neutral, if not a positive experience on gameplay and user attention, rather than having a negative experience. And so that's the big thing that we need to change if we're going to make ads a really an integral part of the game experience, rather than something that is kind of slapped on or forced in front of the user, rather than actually properly connected into the game experience.
Right. And in fact, actually, just as a follow-on question from that, obviously developers are pretty have got a lot of experience of working with other ad formats. Does your platform sit alongside others? I mean, if someone is pretty wedded to the idea of in-app purchases or whatever else, or another new ad format, they can use AdInMo's ad units as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we're additive. Ideally, we hope this is where everything's going to go. But right now, you can have banner ads, you can have your kind of standard video ads as well, and there's a whole chunk of the game experience. If you think about it, if you're playing a game for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or even less than that, you maybe have 30 seconds worth of a video, but actually the vast majority of the game experience is playing the game. So we allow from an advertiser point of view, we can put your ads in front of the user for a much longer part of the game experience, so the whole of the gameplay or chunk of the gameplay, rather than just at these very specific points. And so we fit in a completely separate part of the game experience without interrupting and without getting in the way of the game. So we're definitely additive. We're much better from an advertiser point of view. We're not a performance, so it's brand awareness. It's putting that brand in front of people rather than forcing them to click on the brand and go to something else, which is also not a very nice experience. But we're much more, more able to get these brands in front of users in a much nicer way, rather than actually forcing users. And yes, you can obviously keep on doing your rewarded videos or all the other kinds of monetization that you have in the game.
Great. We're kind of running towards the end of the chat now. I hope Stuart will let us press on for a few more minutes. I think we're kind of into the buffer zone. Just to remind everyone who's watching, if you've got questions for AdInMo, for these guys, drop them into the Q&A box at the bottom. I can see we've got one. I'll come to that in a second. But while anyone's kind of contributing there, Kristan and Chris, I'd like to just come to you with a question. What's the single most important lesson you've learned while building AdInMo? Kristan, what do you think?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. I think it's for me, it's been learning throughout the whole process. I came into this with a very clear vision of what I thought the in-game advertising industry would look like, and this was looking back 3.5, 4 years ago now, and then sometimes I'm a little bit too stubborn in thinking that vision. So having folks like Chris, who have this vast experience, my co-founder Mike, who brought in some of the things that I was maybe did not fit into my vision originally, like the transparency that Chris mentioned originally, and that to me now is a no-brainer. The idea of sharing this information. Why wouldn't you? And yet nobody in the ad industry does this. That's been the real learning for me, is just understanding that vision, sticking to the vision as a guiding star, but also understanding that I'm not the only person with great ideas in this company about how to achieve this, and so listening to those people more has probably been a learning for me.
That's great. And Chris, you've got a lot of experience too. What was the best? What was the single most important lesson you learned while building AdInMo?
I think this has been all the things I've done, is kind of staying really focused. So picking one thing and really focusing on it and doing it really well. So, where I play, we were a mobile games publisher, and that's all we did. And we were successful because of that. At Delta, we were an analytics company aimed purely at games. And by being really focused on one thing, it really allows you to build a really good single kind of solution. And AdInMo is the same. We're very focused on building in-game advertising and dynamic in-game advertising in the mobile space. So that being really focused, I think, is really important.
That's great. So we've got a couple more minutes. So actually, I'd like to just put to you one question that's been dropped into the Q&A box. This is from an anonymous viewer. Brand advertisers are cutting down their spend due to COVID-19. Wouldn't that reduce CPMs, ARPDAU, and brand-based networks like AdInMo? Can you talk about the trends you saw this year?
Yeah, that's an interesting question again. Look, I think across the board, as we see, digital advertising spending across the board is being hit by COVID, no doubt about it, and that's across all advertising channels. What we're seeing, though, is I think twofold. first of all, dying industries, dying advertising channels. So TV, print, that was going away. And we already saw that trend over the last few years. And that trend is now accelerated. They're not coming back. Those ad channels are effectively gone now. So any advertising spend is coming into digital. And second of all, we're seeing that certain brands are leaning in throughout this whole time. COVID will end, whenever it does, whether it's 1 month from now or 1 year from now, it's going to end. And everybody that does advertising is going to need to come back to this. But in the meantime, we're already seeing certain brands that are leaning into this space. And some of them are the kind of obvious brands that you might see. I mean, if you've got kids who are on any digital devices, you probably couldn't go more than 10 minutes earlier this year without seeing a Disney Plus ad, as an example. But other brands, the FMCG, consumer packaged goods brands, they continue to have to sell their products and they continue to advertise. So just finding new ways to advertise, including in games.
Gotcha. And Chris, did you have anything to add on that, on the kind of COVID-19 question and its effect on revenues and things?
No, I mean, I think other than what Kristan was saying, that it's going to have an effect across the board, and it's definitely having an effect on the older, more traditional brands. But it's going to go away. I mean, and we've seen certainly in the games industry that it's actually positively impacted games. So we're seeing an increase just because the games industry is rising. So we're seeing that go up. It's having a small impact on CPM, but not that huge, specifically because we're focused on a new area. So people are picking into this as a new opportunity for getting brands out in front of people. And games is always going to be an interesting place because that's where millennials are. It's where the audience is. They're not in front of TV and they're not in front of web. So games is definitely the place that advertisers want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, one thing that I always have to remember about games is that people's relationship with a game lasts many more hours than it does with a film or with a TV. So it's a TV program, and in fact, someone will immerse themselves in a game world, whether that's a puzzle game or some kind of open world adventure for many, many, many hours. And so their relationship with it is very important. In fact, we're kind of almost out of time. I imagine Stuart's going to crop up shortly and introduce the next guest. I just did want to kind of remind everybody that we've got reports coming out based on this survey. So pocketgamer.biz is currently in the process of compiling all the results from all the survey, which included questions that weren't about ads. So that survey will be out at the end of the month. We expect that to be downloadable in a PDF format on the 30th of September from pocketgamer.biz. We're very grateful for AdInMo's support for that, and that whole survey will be there. And guys, I think AdInMo, with some of that data and your own data and research, you're putting out your own report as well this year, aren't you?
That's correct. Yeah. So there's some specific questions that we asked of the respondents, which we'll be packaging up into a report, probably slightly after the Pocket Gamer one. I think we're going to take a little bit more time. You guys obviously have a bigger team and can pull this together very quickly. We're going to take more time at it, but shortly after yours, we should have one out.
That's great, and I think both of those reports will be fascinating for people. It's good to sort of take the temperature of the industry occasionally and put some of those kind of numbers and put some numbers on those assumptions and then put those numbers in context. So we'll see that from both. So look, thank you very much to my guests from AdInMo, Chris Wright and Kristan. Thank you very much. Now I think Stuart is about to make sure that Kristan goes on to the next panel. So I'm going to give you your round of applause. Unfortunately, we're not here in person, so you won't hear it. I'm sure the next time we get to meet, you'll hear the applause of the audience in person. But that's from me. Thank you very much for your time, Stuart. I'm gonna hand back to you for the
Thanks,
next
Dave.
part.
Thank you very much. I think you stay there. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Chris. We obviously know each other from a long time ago. That was great insight. Thank you very much. And as someone who sold a print business about 7 or 8 years ago, it's always good to be reminded what a smart decision it was.